Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Christopher Vaughn? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, consider supporting me on Patreon, and check out my podcast on YouTube, Bella Grande Media. I will put the relevant links for those items in the description for this video. So first I'll look at the background of this case. I'll move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Starting with the background, Christopher and Kimberly Vaughn lived in Seattle, Washington, along with their 3 children, Abigail, Cassandra, and Blake. Christopher worked as a private investigator in his own agency. Most of his work was in the area of missing persons and cybercrime prevention. Kimberly also had an interest in criminal justice. She would eventually earn a degree in criminal justice and had plans to join Christopher as a private investigator. In 2005, the couple decided to shut down the agency and move to Oswego, Illinois. Christopher had been offered a job at a computer forensics company. Kimberly was a stay-at-home mother. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On June 14, 2007, the 5 members of the Vaughn family were in their red 2004 Ford Expedition driving to Springfield, Illinois to visit a water park called Knights Action Park. They were on Interstate 55, just south of Joliet, Illinois, when they pulled over on a frontage road. At about 5:20 a.m., a man driving to work saw Christopher Vaughn limping away from his vehicle. The motorist asked him if he was injured. Christopher responded, "No, I think my wife shot me." Emergency services responded. They found Christopher had superficial gunshot wounds to his left wrist and left thigh. Inside the family vehicle, they would find the dead bodies of Kimberly and all 3 children. Kimberly had sustained a single gunshot wound under her chin. She was in the front passenger seat. The children had each been shot twice. They were in the back seat. A 9mm Taurus semi-automatic pistol was found on the floorboard at Kimberly's feet. The weapon was owned by Christopher Vaughn. When Vaughn was in the hospital, he claimed he couldn't remember what happened, which is curious considering the motorist recalled that Christopher indicated his wife had shot him. Christopher told the nurse, "You should call my wife. She gets mad when I don't call her." Christopher was released from the hospital the same day and interviewed at the police station. They kept him for about 14 hours. Christopher would voluntarily return for another interview on June 15 and a third interview on June 17. He explained to the police that Kimberly asked him to pull off because she was nauseated. This was not unusual for her. She had migraine headaches that caused nausea. Christopher remembered pulling his vehicle onto the frontage road, parking it in front of a cell phone tower, and getting out of the vehicle. He checked the rear tires of the vehicle and checked the strap holding the luggage container on top of the vehicle. Upon returning to the front of the vehicle, he noticed that his leg was bleeding. He said he did not remember being shot. The police implied that perhaps Kimberly did the shooting. Christopher said there was no way that she could have hurt her children. He also said that Kimberly did not have a firearm. At another point in the interview process, investigators explained to Christopher that his wife and children were dead. He asked them to bring Kimberly in so that he could talk to her. Christopher said he had nothing to do with the shooting. Christopher was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He would be tried on August of 2012. The prosecution's theory of the crime was that Christopher eliminated his family so he could live in the Canadian wilderness away from people. He was found guilty and sentenced to 4 life sentences to be served consecutively. Now moving to my analysis, was Christopher Vaughn actually guilty? There are many people who believe he was not guilty. Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea of guilt, starting with the inculpatory evidence. Christopher appeared to have some desire to move to rural Canada and live in the wilderness. He was stockpiling camping gear. Christopher had communicated about living in the woods and camping with a man who lived in Ottawa. In May of 2007, Christopher visited the Yukon Territory and allegedly asked the man to help him fake his own death so that his wife could collect his life insurance. Christopher Vaughn used to make frequent trips to strip clubs. During 2 of those visits, on June 6 and June 12, 2007, Christopher had visited a club and spent $4,780 on one dancer. The last visit was just 2 days before the murders. Christopher told the dancer that he only wanted to talk. They didn't have any physical contact. 2 exotic dancers testified against Christopher Vaughn. One of them said that he visited the club 4 or 5 times. He talked about how he wanted to leave his wife behind and live in the woods in Canada. The other one said that Christopher told her that he was single and had no children. When he was in prison, he wrote about 140 pages of content in a notebook. He mentioned one of the dancers in his writings, but never wrote about his wife or children. The Ford expedition was parked on the frontage road, much farther away from Interstate 55 than it needed to be to simply pull over and attend to the concern that Kimberly ostensibly had. 2 cell phones were in the Ford expedition. Why didn't Christopher Vaughn call for help? Why did he wait until a motorist discovered him? If Kimberly was really the killer, why did she fail to kill the only real physical threat? One would think that she would continue shooting at him until he was dead or incapacitated, not leave him with only minor wounds. Other points related to this: what are the chances that Christopher would be shot twice at close range and only sustained superficial wounds, especially considering that everyone else was killed? Why didn't Christopher try to prevent Kimberly from continuing to shoot? Why didn't he attempt to stop her when she was shooting into the back seat? Forensic tests indicate that Christopher was not moving when he was bleeding near the car. This seems unusual considering he would have just been shot. One would think that he would be moving away or again perhaps toward Kimberly to stop her. Kimberly had a $1 million life insurance policy. Christopher appeared to have trouble remembering what happened, which seemed convenient under the circumstances. Christopher claimed that he woke up the family around 4 a.m. for a surprise trip to the water park. This seems convenient that this wasn't a planned trip that everyone would have known about. Forensic evidence in the vehicle pointed to the idea that Christopher was seated when his wife was killed, which deviates from his story that he was outside the vehicle. Now moving to the exculpatory evidence. The prosecution's theory of the crime is not necessarily supported by the forensic evidence at the crime scene. For example, the state had asserted that Christopher unbuckled Kimberly's seatbelt before he shot her, but a bloodstain on Kimberly's right thumb appears to support the idea that she unbuckled her seatbelt after Christopher was shot. This is consistent with the idea that she shot Christopher, then unbuckled her seatbelt so that she could turn around to shoot toward the back seat. Kimberly's wound was consistent with one that was self-inflicted, including the fact that the barrel was touching her skin when the gun discharged. One of the state police investigators said that every time he would find evidence supporting the idea that Kimberly was the shooter, the other investigators would change their story of the shooting to match the new evidence, but they would stick with Christopher as the shooter. All the visits that Christopher made to the club, spending time with other women, and spending a lot of money would provide Kimberly a motive to kill Christopher to about the same extent as it would provide Christopher a motive to kill Kimberly. Like she could have been mad at the fact that he was spending a lot of money on dancers. In an email that Kimberly sent to Christopher 2 weeks before her death, she wrote that she was experiencing a big personality change and anxiety change. Other family members reported witnessing Kimberly having a panic attack and being agitated during a recent get-together. Kimberly took Topamax and nortriptyline for migraine headaches. Her level of nortriptyline was found to be near the low end of the toxic range. In addition, the FDA issued an alert in December of 2008 warning that Topamax increased the risk of having thoughts of self-harm. It would appear as though the drugs in Kimberly's system could have contributed to her being homicidal and wanting to bring an end to her life. As far as the $1 million life insurance policy, which of course is inculpatory, how would Chris spend that money in the wilderness? Would that really be a motive? Furthermore, Kimberly is the one who bought the insurance policy. When she did so, she asked Chris if he wanted insurance on the children as well, but he declined. The police tried to use a familiar trick on Christopher. They said that there were security cameras on the cell phone tower that recorded the entire incident. Christopher was not afraid when he heard this. He actually pleaded with the investigators to get the video, like he wanted to see it. We see this same trick was used with George Zimmerman, and he said the same thing. It was a well-known case in Florida where Zimmerman had shot and killed Trayvon Martin, and Zimmerman was eventually acquitted in the murder trial. In that case, the prosecutors tried to turn around and say that George Zimmerman had knowledge of police tactics. That's why he didn't respond to the trick. So really, the prosecutors were trying to say that no matter what the police did, Zimmerman looked guilty. They really wanted it both ways in that scenario. In the trial of Christopher Vaughn, it was not used against him that he was not afraid to have the video be available and be viewed by everyone. It is believed that the first bullet fired at Christopher, regardless of who fired it, was the one that struck his wrist. The second one, which struck his thigh, came within a fraction of an inch of his genitals. If he was the shooter, did he not realize where those parts were located, or did he believe those parts would not be needed in the future? This seems like a really risky move. Also, it seems unusual for somebody in his situation, like if he was the killer, to shoot themselves 2 times. One of the bullets that struck Cassandra exited through the back of her seat and lodged in the 3rd row seat. The trajectory of that bullet indicates it was fired from the passenger seat, where again Kimberly was seated. So back to the question, considering all the evidence, was Christopher Vaughn guilty? I think he was actually guilty. The more difficult question is, was there reasonable doubt in this case? The only area that approaches reasonable doubt in this case, in my opinion, is the fact that one of the investigators is confident that Kimberly was the shooter. I feel this is a fairly significant circumstance. Usually the police kind of go along with the theory that a husband would commit a crime like this under these circumstances. For one of them to deviate from the story and say that it was the wife who did it, I think that really does stand out as notable. This makes it tough to figure out if there's reasonable doubt or not, but I think that Christopher was still guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's close. There is almost reasonable doubt, but not quite, in my mind. Here's my logic. There are only 3 possibilities in the situation. Some unknown party was the killer. This seems particularly unlikely because how would they know that Christopher was going to stop the vehicle on that frontage road? Were the killers just waiting in some remote area hoping somebody would show up? Or were they following the vehicle just hoping they would stop? Doesn't seem like that would really happen. The second option, Kimberly was the killer. This is certainly possible. The way she died suggests that she could have been and that she had a motive. But it makes no sense that she would fail to kill Christopher. Everyone else was murdered, but for whatever reason, again, he ended up with 2 superficial wounds. The last possibility is that Christopher Vaughn was the killer. He was driving the vehicle. It was his firearm. He was familiar with that weapon. He fired it on several occasions. And most importantly, he seemed to have other plans in his life that did not involve his wife or children. He was seriously investigating that whole living off the grid situation. In addition, it's difficult to believe that he just happened to lose his memory at that one specific point in time. This brings me to the mental health argument, which was part of Christopher's defense. The argument of the defense was that Chris had memory loss, and it could be explained by a disorder called dissociative amnesia. This is a type of amnesia that can occur around the events of a trauma. I've seen this many times. I don't have any doubt that it's a real condition. For example, it happens once in a while with severe motor vehicle accidents. People remember driving onto the road where the accident occurred, and then they remember waking up in an ambulance or in the hospital. But the actual accident is missing from their memory. The question becomes, did Christopher have this type of amnesia, or did he conveniently mimic the symptoms of the disorder to escape responsibility? Put another way, was this dissociative amnesia, or I don't want to go to prison amnesia, another common condition among people accused of homicide? Let's take a look at this disorder. Dissociative amnesia is a severe memory impairment in the absence of other major cognitive impairments. In the DSM-5, there are 4 criteria for the disorder. 1, the inability to recall important autobiographical information, usually of a traumatic or stressful nature. The amnesia can be characterized as localized, selective, or generalized. Localized means that the forgotten events occurred during a circumscribed period of time, usually the time of the traumatic event. This is the most common type of dissociative amnesia. Selective means that the person can recall some, but not all, of the events in the circumscribed period of time. This appears to be what Christopher Vaughn was claiming to have. He had bits and pieces of the event that he was able to remember, but he couldn't get a clear picture of everything that happened. Generalized amnesia is when a person loses their memory for their entire life history. This is quite rare. This type of dissociative amnesia is more common in soap operas than in real life. Moving to the next criterion, number 2, the symptoms cause clinically significant distress. 3, the disturbance is not attributable to substance use or a medical condition. I'm not aware of any claims in this case that Christopher was using substances or had any type of medical explanation for losing his memory. The last symptom, number 4, the disturbance is not better explained by other mental disorders, for example, PTSD, dissociative identity disorder, or somatic symptom disorder. Again, I'm not aware that Christopher Vaughn was claiming to have any of these disorders. So we don't see really any other explanation outside of the dissociative amnesia was real or Christopher Vaughn was malingering. He was lying about the memory loss. With this information in mind, is it likely that Christopher Vaughn had dissociative amnesia? This condition is quite rare. The 12-month prevalence is 1% in males. Most of the time, the memories will come back, and Christopher Vaughn has claimed to recovered some of the memories. About 25 to 40% of those who were found guilty of homicide claim to have partial or complete memory loss. The reality is that malingering about memory loss creates a convenient situation where a defendant doesn't have to offer any explanation for what happened at the crime scene. They don't have to address inconsistencies in their story. They don't have to risk committing to a story that doesn't match the physical evidence. Another thing to consider here is that Christopher Vaughn could have dissociative amnesia and still be guilty of the homicides. The very act of committing the homicides could lead to the condition. Statistically, malingering is a much more likely explanation for this memory loss than a legitimate disorder like dissociative amnesia. I don't know if Christopher had it or not, but the odds seem to be against it. The case of Christopher Vaughn is a bit of a mystery. It has a lot of components of similar cases, but those components don't seem to fit together very well. For example, it has a man with other romantic interest, but in this case, Christopher only talked to the dancers. The case features a life insurance policy, but it wasn't Christopher's idea to get that policy, and he wanted to live off the grid where money would not matter a whole lot. It had a victim who was potentially homicidal. The case features a perpetrator with superficial wounds, but one of those wounds could have been very serious. Another mystery in this case is, why didn't Christopher simply stick with the story that Kimberly was the shooter? It was almost like he didn't think people would believe him, so to build up his credibility, he pretended not to believe himself as well. Like he was with all the skeptics on one side of the room, looking over at an image of himself saying, "Yeah, I don't know about this guy." He may have thought this was a good strategy, but it worked against him. If he was malingering as far as the dissociative amnesia, this hurt him as well. There was no reason to pretend to have memory loss. His defense, which was that Kimberly was the shooter, was possible. There was really no advantage to forgetting details of what happened. Another possibility, as I mentioned, is that Christopher committed the murders and actually had dissociative amnesia. So in this sense, the memory loss was quite inconvenient for him. He couldn't cover up his behavior because he may not have remembered what happened. What do I think happened in this case? I think that Christopher wanted a fresh start, but it's not really clear why he wanted that fresh start and why he felt that killing was the best way to get it. He didn't know how to fake being traumatized very well. He wove in the whole memory loss scenario and generally did not seem convincing. People described Christopher Vaughn as unemotional. I think this damaged his ability to understand how people would perceive him. He was not a convincing victim. He looked more like a perpetrator. Moving to my final thoughts in this case, family annihilators like Christopher Vaughn, Christopher Coleman, and Christopher Watts all share the first name Christopher, but I think that's just a coincidence. I believe the more important similarity is that they were all involved with other women at the time of the murders. They all wanted something different. They wanted to change. In these cases, we see what appears to be a consuming level of narcissism, a shocking lack of empathy, and a fairly transparent effort to escape responsibility. Christopher Vaughn wanted to be cut off from society for a long time and live someplace out of view. Perhaps in the end, he got what he wanted in the most destructive way possible. Those are my thoughts on the case of Christopher Vaughn. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.